I came into this world with a sigh pressed into skin, already aching to cry. My eyes were wells before they saw water. My hands trembled, longing for what they could not hold. They say joy is the sun and sorrow the shadow. But what if the sun has hidden itself in the shadow, and joy, that sly bird, only sings when you stop chasing? I wandered through the marketplace of voices, all shouting happiness in different tongues. "Buy this," said one. "Drink this," said another. "Be seen, be loved, be golden," cried the last. I bought them all, wrapped myself in their perfumes and promises until I no longer knew the scent of my own breath. Still, the ache remained, like a flute with no reed, a poem without a breath. One night, under a vine-heavy sky, I saw an old man sweeping the steps of a ruined mosque. His eyes were closed, but he was smiling like someone who had finally heard the silence speak. I asked him, "Have you found what I cannot find?" He laughed and said, "Why do you search for joy like a hunter in the desert? It is not prey. It is the wind that comes when you become still." I told him, "I have sorrow like an ocean in my chest." He said, "Then you are lucky. Joy is a pearl buried in sorrow's deepest wave. Only those who drown can find it." That night I did not sleep. I sat with the moon like an old friend and asked her how she endures the darkness. She said, "Child, I do not shine. I only reflect the fire of another." And I wept, because even the moon knew she was not her own joy. The next morning I left my house, left behind the clothes stitched with other people's dreams, left behind the mirror that only showed my face, never my soul. I became a beggar walking toward the mountain, not to climb it, but to lie down and let the wind strip me bare. I carried nothing but a bowl of questions. Each step I took, one question spilled. What is joy? Where does sorrow go when it leaves? Why does the heart crack even when held gently? And why do the stars seem so indifferent to our prayers? I met a fox in a thorn bush. She said, "Joy is not a place. It is a way of disappearing." I met a widow making bread. She said, "Joy is when you need sorrow into something warm." I met a child burying stones. He said, "Joy is when you forget what you buried." But none of their answers filled my bowl. I was hungry not for wisdom, but for the touch of something eternal. So I kept walking, through silence so deep it bent time, through valleys where even the sun whispered, "You are not meant to live always in light." And then, at the edge of my hunger, I came to a garden made of dust. No fruit, no flowers, no leaves, only dust, dancing in shafts of light like 1,000 forgotten prayers. And in that barren place, I fell to my knees, and for the first time, did not ask to be happy. I only asked to be whole. I knelt in the garden of dust, not to pray, not to beg, but simply to be nothing. And in that sacred emptiness, a flicker stirred beneath my ribs. Not joy, not sorrow, but a presence older than names. A flame without heat, a bird that sings without a throat, a tear that falls upward. It asked nothing of me but to listen. So I listened. At first, I heard my thoughts, wild dogs pacing in cages. They barked of regret, of things I should have done, of love lost to silence, of time spilled like oil on stone. Then I heard the deeper voices, the ones that live in bone. They spoke in the tongue of ancestors, in syllables I did not understand but wept to hear. And beneath even that, beneath all words, was a stillness so complete that I feared I had died. But no, I was more alive than ever. The fire beneath the silence was not burning me. It was becoming me. There, in the garden with no color, I became the flame without smoke. Not dancing, but watching the dance. I saw myself from the outside, a stranger wearing my sadness like a robe. And I laughed. Oh, beloved, I laughed. Not from joy, but from the freedom of finally knowing I was not my sorrow. It was then that the dust began to sing, not with music, but with meaning. Each grain was a word, each breeze a verse, each empty branch a scripture written in the ink of longing. I asked the wind, "Who am I now that I have let go?" And it said, You are the question and the quiet after. I asked the light, what is joy if not pleasure? And it answered, joy is what remains when pleasure has left and you still dance. So I rose from the ground, not with purpose, but with presence. The kind a candle has when it knows it will burn for only a short while but still gives all its light. I began to walk again, not searching, but following the silence that now walked beside me like a lover who no longer needs to be named. And everywhere I went, I saw signs. A tree bent in prayer, a donkey chewing slowly, as if tasting time, a woman sewing the hem of her grief into a garment of grace. Each was a verse in the poem of becoming. Each taught me that joy is not found, it is remembered. We were born with it, wrapped in it, suckling on it between cries. But the world taught us to trade it for gold, for fame, for safety, for masks that smile while our souls starve. Now I knew joy was the fire beneath the silence, and sorrow was the smoke that led me to it. I walked deeper into the world, carrying no map, only the sound of my own breathing and the hush between heartbeats. In a forgotten village, where even the crows spoke in whispers, I found a mirror leaning against a well. Its glass was dull, dust-blown and cracked, like it had seen too many faces and refused to remember them. I knelt before it and asked, "Will you show me who I am?" The mirror replied, "I do not show faces. I show what is left when all masks have been burned." I leaned closer, but my reflection did not appear. Only a flicker, like a candlelight seen through water. Then a second flicker, and a third, and suddenly, not one self, but 100,000 selves, each one shaped by a sorrow, each one lit by a longing. I saw the child who learned to smile so others would not worry. I saw the lover who gave more than they had and blamed themselves for the emptiness. I saw the pilgrim who wandered in circles calling it progress. I saw the mask wearer, the pleaser, the one who pretended not to cry at night because even tears had become too proud. And then, a version of me with no face at all, just light, no name, just breath. The mirror said, "This is the you that remains when your story ends, when your sadness is no longer your God, when you have stopped selling pieces of your soul for applause." I fell back from the mirror, tears climbing down my neck like roots trying to return to the earth. I whispered, "I don't know how to be that version of me." The mirror said, "You are not meant to be it. You are meant to remember it. It is what you were before the world told you who to become." And then the mirror cracked down the center, and in the shatter I heard a sound, not breaking but opening, like a chest unlocked after generations, like bones making space for wings. A voice rose from somewhere behind the reflection, from some ancient heart, maybe God's, maybe mine. It said, "You will not find joy by becoming someone else. You will find it by unbecoming everything that isn't truth." I wrapped those words around my shoulders like a robe woven of thunder and softness, and walked away from the mirror, not to forget, but to embody. Now, with each step, I left behind a name, one I had carried like an heirloom that never fit. I am not the wounded child. I am not the martyr for others' comfort. I am not the echo of broken love. I am not the mask that smiles while dying. I am what remains when even silence bows. The road curved like a question I had asked in dreams but never dared aloud. Not made of stone, but of memory. Each step echoing footsteps I forgot I had taken. I passed no travelers, only moments. A child's laughter rising from an empty hut. A scarf caught in a tree, dancing for no one. A broken jug by a stream, still catching drops as if it believed in purpose. I asked the wind, "Where do I go now?" It replied, "Not forward, not back, but inward." And as I listened, I saw it, a door. Not carved, not placed, but revealed in the side of a hill that pulsed with breath. It was small, humble, covered in moss and time. No handle, no lock, only a single word scratched into its wood. "Enter." I stood before it, fear and longing wrestling in my chest like two birds in a single cage. "What lies behind you?" I asked. door answered, "Nothing that is not already inside you." I pressed my forehead to it, and it opened, not with force, but with surrender. Inside, no light, only warmth, no walls, only echoes. It was not a room, it was a remembering. I was back in the cave of my soul, the one I sealed long ago with promises I never meant to break. And there waiting was joy, not radiant, not laughing, just present, sitting like a friend who had arrived before me and waited without complaint. She wore no jewels, no veil. She was not made of gold. She looked tired but eternal, like someone who has wept with every creature and still believes in blooming. She looked at me and said nothing, because what was there to say? We had known each other long before the world taught me her name. I asked, "Why did you hide for so long?" She smiled gently and replied, "I did not hide. You built walls from your wanting and called them homes. I waited for the moment you would knock on your own heart. I wept not from pain, but from the sudden realization that I had never been abandoned, only distracted." Joy placed her hand upon my chest. The moment she did, all my old selves, the broken, the bitter, the begging, stood around me in a circle, not to accuse, but to witness. Each one placed something in my hands. A single note from a forgotten song, a feather from the first dream I buried, cup cracked but unspilled, a piece of mirror not to reflect, but to refract. And as the circle faded, Joy leaned close and whispered, "You are ready." "Ready for what?" I asked, and she answered, "To become the doorway for someone else." I left the door not by walking, but by disappearing, not vanished into air, but shed like an old robe that no longer remembered my shape. I was not the same, not brighter, not lighter, but emptied of confusion, like a lamp finally poured out of the oil of pretending. And in that emptiness, I became the wick. I became the silence that no longer feared its own echo. I walked into the world again, but not as a seeker. Now I was the sought. Not because I had answers, but because I no longer needed them. The mountains still rose, the rivers still fell, children still cried, and lovers still parted. But I watched it all with the eyes of someone who knew the fire was never in the flame, but in the space around it. I came to a village where grief was a river and everyone lived downstream. They told me their sorrows like sacred heirlooms. Each one held it up and said, "This is who I am." I did not fix them. I did not speak. I simply lit a candle in the center of their rooms and left it burning. Some ignored it, some cursed it, but a few, oh beloved, a few, sat beside it and remembered how to breathe. One boy followed me. He asked, "Where are you going?" I said, "I do not go, I burn." He asked, "Are you a prophet?" I said, "No. I am the proof that sorrow is not the end." He asked, "Are you not afraid of the dark?" I answered, "I am the dark when it learns to love itself." He walked with me for 7 days, and on the 8th, he turned to go back. "I have learned what I needed," he said, "not from your words, but from the silence between them." And I bowed, not to him, but to the mystery that had turned my emptiness into a lantern for another. That night, I stood by the sea where no one came, and the stars bowed low, not for me, but for the truth I carried like a flame on my tongue. And I sang not a song, but a remembering, something older than melody, truer than speech. The first language, the fire humming to the dust whispering back, "We are not lost, we are becoming." And as I sang, the wind danced with me. The sand rose in spiral praise. Even my tears did not fall. They flew back into the sky that first wept me into being. I was not a man anymore, not a name, not a tale. I was not even joy. I was only what remains when longing has nothing left to reach for. At the edge of speech, where the voice unravels into wind, I met someone who had never left me. He stood barefoot, wrapped in the same silence I had once feared. His face, not mine, but familiar, as if dreamt across lifetimes. I asked, "Who are you?" And he replied, I am the one who waited inside you while you searched outside. He held no scroll, no staff, no dazzling robe of prophets. Only a gaze so steady it made the world seem like a reflection in a puddle about to ripple. I carried your sorrow, he said, not to punish but to hollow you, so joy would have space to land. I wept when you forgot, but I never moved. I am the root beneath your fear, the stillness inside your storms. He took my hand, but it felt like touching the center of fire and not being burned. Do you remember the first time you were broken? He asked. Yes, I whispered. He nodded. That was me too. I broke you open so you would stop mistaking your skin for yourself. I asked, then why did I suffer so long? He said, because you tried to end sorrow with force, instead of letting it finish its song. And suddenly, I saw my life not as wounds, but as music. Each heartbreak, a drumbeat. Each betrayal, a minor chord in a symphony too vast for one lifetime. He said, you searched for joy as if it were something missing, but joy is not a treasure. It is the soil from which everything rises, and you are the seed that cracked open in longing. I fell to my knees, not in defeat, but in awe, for this presence, this radiant hush was not other. He was my soul before the world put a name on it. He knelt beside me, placed a kiss upon my brow, and said, I am you. When you remember you have never been broken, only transformed. The earth hummed beneath us, not a sound but a pulse like God breathing through stone. And in that pulse, I saw them all again. The widow baking bread, the child burying stones, the fox in the thorn bush, the cracked mirror, the dust garden, the empty room, the flame, all of them me, all of them waiting for me to return to myself. I stood, whole, not perfect, but whole. The ache remained, but now it was music. The longing still sang, but now it sang with me, not against. And the one who waited inside me smiled and walked into my chest, not to hide, but to live there, fully, as flame, as breath, as joy. When I walked again, the road was not beneath me. It was within me. Each step no longer forward, but deeper. I was not heading anywhere. I was arriving everywhere. And the earth, it no longer felt like stone or soil, it felt like sky. As if I were not walking on the world, but on the breath of God held still just long enough to let me pass. I paused at a stream, bent down to drink and saw my reflection. But this time it didn't look like me. It looked like the space between stars, the hush between waves, the moment after an exhale when the soul is most exposed. I whispered to the water, is this who I am now? And the water answered, you have always been this. Only your eyes were dusted with time. So I walked on, and under every step the sky lifted me, not up but inward, no longer seeking the heavens, for the heavens had learned to bloom beneath my feet. Every stone became a sermon, every tree a teacher. Even silence itself sat beside me like an old friend who had grown weary of being misunderstood. In a quiet meadow, I met a woman whose eyes held thunderclouds and laughter. She was weaving something with threads I could not see. What are you making? I asked. She smiled. I am braiding your breath into the next dawn. I laughed, not because I understood, but because my soul did. She offered me a place beside her. I declined. Not yet, I said. I still have echoes to meet. So I kept walking, carrying no burden except the miracle of now. And each person I passed was a mirror, but not of myself, of God, peeking through their wounds, smiling through their weariness. A beggar handed me a torn feather. A soldier wept at my feet. A madman kissed my shadow. And each time I did not shrink. I did not turn. I stood still, letting their pain rise like incense and return to the sky from which it once fell. And still I walked. Through villages where joy was buried in bread. Through deserts where even thirst had a name. Through temples that had forgotten what they worshipped. And under every step, the sky remained soft, strong, forgiving, like the love I once begged for but now carried within every atom. And I knew I was no longer the pilgrim. I was no longer the seeker. I was the path itself, the silent thread that connects longing to laughter, the bridge of dust and fire between the weeping heart and the joy that never left it.